Good afternoon. Chris the Contemplative here with another trailer for my sub series. It's a subsection of my wake show called Are You Spiritual? And the point of this show is to discuss and challenge preconceived notions of what spirituality is, because everyone likes to seem to throw this around, especially on dating apps and things like that. And this term is beyond loaded. It's one of the most important and nuanced terms in the human language. And before, I would say last week I was talking about our formation in terms of the religious sphere and how it's kind of dumbed us down. Now I'm going to talk about our formation in the academic sphere. And why is this important? Well, to illustrate this and to show you how far we've fallen, I referenced you to videos which are in the description. The first one is Vito, who is a guy who reviews movies and video games sometimes. Typical YouTube fare. He's relatively funny. He made an article about a fake Olympian athlete winning a medal, and it took off like wildfire. People were retweeting it and reposting it. And this just goes to show you the NPC mentality. This shows you how people have fallen so far in their understanding of individual thought and critical thinking that we have now been reduced to the most, I would say, intricate and the biggest phone game. It's a social experiment, and the internet has become a phone game. Now, regardless of whether it's intentional or not, you clearly see this happening. People just repeat what they've heard others say and call it a day. And sadly, I wish I could say that this was just for jokes or for that people don't take the internet seriously, so they don't really care to check things out seriously on the internet. But I really believe, from voting patterns, political discussions, and discussions on anything, that this has actually atrophied our brains and our minds. Now, where did this all come from? This is an extreme example, okay? People being this quick to say what's true or not, or to repost things, that's an extreme example. But even for people that are relatively smart, you can be indoctrinated in a collective hive mind way of thinking, where you can be influenced by peer pressure or bias, your own pride, you not wanting to hear something, or you could be indoctrinated through a system that doesn't teach you, so your ignorance guides you, or you could be overly emotional. And all of this stems from an idolization of the emotions, the intellect. And it really doesn't make sense why we consider where we're at in terms of our minds and our emotions to be the end all be all gospel of everything that's true. Maybe it's just an assumption we make in our heads, but we clearly know from science and from the fact that the people that are smarter than us that we do not have a grasp on truth. There are some things that are true. There are objective truths. A lot of people can all agree that murder is wrong, and the Ten Commandments hold up pretty strong in our courts today. But there are plenty of things we don't know. There are plenty of things that I don't know. It could be one, because we're limited human beings. Two, from the limitations of our culture and formation. And three, it could be our own ego. Okay. And if you want to learn how to be spiritual, I highly advise in this series to learn to ask questions. A truly, I would say, wise person, a truly truth seeking person, especially in the realm of the metaphysical and the spiritual, does not jump to answers. They follow with questions. Okay. The question is more important than the answer, especially if you believe in the mystery of God and how God is bigger than the universe. You have to humble yourself. And so you see these people with their armchair spiritual terms, like, for example, I would say on the more liberal California hippie side of things, the New Age side of things, they throw around terms like non dualism and ego death and what else? They also like to use the word. Oh, I think that's good enough. I'm a little bit out of my depth when it comes to their usual lingo because I don't really talk to those spheres that much. I do know about it, but I do know about those two terms. Okay, those two terms get thrown around by everyone who's had some kind of acid trip or spiritual experience or whatever. Do you know how complicated those two terms are if you've heard of them before? This involves different definitions. Multiple religions, including my own, have different definitions of what an ego death is in its context, which can go into drastically different conclusions. Non dualism is a hotly debated, controversial term when it comes to Buddhists, Jainists, and Hindus. They all have their own rather passionate understandings of the Buddhists pretty much reject the Jainist view of that. They are not into moral relativism at all. They have a different understanding of that. And so you're throwing around these terms just like we throw around other terms like love and truth and gender. And we have very, very little depth. We can say we do, we can repeat what others have told us. We can even fall into appeal to authority fallacy, where you overly rely on authorities to the point where if they don't even make any sense on a common sense level, you're still going to say, well, they know better than me, or listen to the experts, or do your research. That's appeal to authority logical fallacy. You can look that up. It's a real thing. And on the right wing, you have terms like, um, okay, you have traditional. Which tradition are you talking about? There's been hundreds of traditions throughout the human history, and it's always changing. And you also have this term thrown around, Yeshua. There's this whole group of evangelicals who believe that saying the infinite God's name, who created everything and definitely knows every language, saying the correct language will get God to answer you better, more than using English or Chinese for Jesus. I mean, this is just a whole level of superficiality. And of course, there's all kinds of hypocrisy. Like these people that will tell everyone to use the word Yeshua have an issue with Catholics liking to pray in Latin or Catholics going to other intercessors or the liturgy. It's just there's just so much hypocrisy and irony. We are in the land of the stupid, superficial mentality, the NPC mentality. And this can affect your spirituality. In fact, you could even say it's a spirituality, this idea of being completely lacking in understanding. It can ruin your life. It can make you very gullible. People have gotten into cults through gullible, superficial thinking, and it can make you just depressed. Dr. Paul Vitz, in his meta model, which is something we've gotten onto in terms of Zoom discussions here, he makes a great case that much of our psychological malaise is from the fact that we are not truly alive. We are not truly alive in God. We are not truly alive in love of neighbor. And we have a warped understanding of how to truly live as an individual. I agree. I think that it's goes beyond just, oh, what happened to me in the past, who hurt me. But you can hurt yourself by insulting your intelligence, by not being truly alive. You can tell yourselves all kinds of things, but in your subconscious and unconscious, and in your reality, and what you truly can see when you're at your lowest lows, you can see that you are not doing that well because you are not truly alive. And this is one way people aren't truly alive. They don't have any value within an objective truth. They don't have any value within themselves, really often, because they are constantly relying on the opinions of others. They have no real opinions of their own. And this is another video I'm going to post, which is why I don't care about other opinions. I made a little post about that. I will post that as well, where I go into detail about myself and why I'm not really concerned about viewer count. because I know how things snowball. I know how paradigms shift eventually. Lastly, to illustrate this, we have this issue with believing that the brain is like this eternal, omniscient being. When in actuality, the brain is a muscle. It can always be improved, it can always be exercised. And the better brain and mind you have, the better conclusions you can come to. So let's humble ourselves. Let's look outside. Let's remember that the universe is bigger than us. Let's remember that there are ideas bigger than us. And let's eat better. Let's sleep better. Let's practice mental exercises. Let's ask questions. Play some chess or check out the logic, the syllogism video that I'm posting in the description, where he walks you through what logic is and how Socrates formed conclusions through a method. There's an actual method of forming intellectual thought. And this is part of classical education. And replace those terms instead of with mortal and man or Socrates in the first syllogism, replace it with emotions and spirituality. Make a conclusion that emotions are equal to spirituality. And you'll see that not only is it untruthful when you really think about what we know about the brain and how fickle emotions are, but it can also be an invalid statement. There's a difference between an invalid statement and an untruthful statement. And most of the time these days, you have invalid and untruthful statements where the information isn't even organized in a coherent manner. You're like, well, where is this coming from? You're throwing in random information that has nothing to do with other information, or you're throwing in a different category. That's what validity is about. It helps you organize your thoughts so you don't get carried away. And then, of course, there's things that just aren't true, like the fake Olympic athlete. So I hope you can come out to my broadcast 1 p.m. Eastern this Saturday. We'll go into more depth about this. I will attempt to charitably knock down all of these assumptions and idols we have in our language and in our culture so that we can begin anew and we can truly seek something authentic. Take care and God bless.